Welcome to another episode of T-Dub's Film Room, brought to you by thebarnauburn.com. We've got another commit breakdown video. Four-star athlete, Payton Falzone, all right, quarterback flip from Penn State. Let's take a look. All right, I say athlete sort of tongue-in-cheek because, a lot of the commentary, the verbiage, I don't know, the scuttlebutt around this was, he was the second quarterback committed to Penn State. He's from Pennsylvania. Whispers, murmurs, they were going to convert into a tight end. This whole thing happened fast. If you're watching this video, you're probably an Auburn fan and you're probably aware of all this, or maybe you're a Penn State fan and you're still aware of all this. But essentially, one of the top athletes in the country. We'll look at some of this stuff. He is very athletic. As we jump into the huddle highlights, we will see he's got some impressive stuff, right? He's 6'5", 205 pounds. He runs a 10.9 something verified 100 meter, 4.5 40, 22 miles per hour on the catapult. He's got a big arm. All right. He's got a big arm. We're going to go back just a second here. He's got a strange throwing motion. All right. It's a little bit of a wind up. It's kind of a shoulder. I don't know. I'm not a quarterback biomechanics expert by any means, but I know what smooth and quick looks like. I wouldn't describe his throwing motion as that. But here, all right, this is why he has a high ceiling. This is why he's a four-star prospect. This is why, whether it was Penn State as a quarterback or maybe potentially a tight end, or Auburn as a quarterback, potentially a tight end, and then he makes throws like that, kind of on the move and off his back foot, 50 yards in the air, all right, with basically just a whip of the arm. He's a complicated guy to evaluate, quite frankly. You start throwing around, 6'5" with wheels as a quarterback in high school, and somebody that, even though he's a four-star, he was committed to Penn State, he's a Pennsylvania kid, maybe slightly undervalued because I think people are looking at his throwing motion and thinking he's going to have a lot of work to do. And they'll start throwing around comps like Josh Allen and, some of this kind of stuff. This right here, it's funny. He looks more natural as a thrower. His throwing motion looks better when he is on the move or off platform than it does when he's in the pocket. There it is again. You can kind of see he kind of like locks and extends, and then he has to get like it's almost like his shoulder blade like rounded over the top on these throws when he's got his base set and he's in the pocket. There he is again, off platform, on the move, and he's able to use his arm talent, and it looks a lot smoother. That's a ridiculous throw he just made. Here we go, moving to the left. All right, again, pretty good there, pretty accurate on the move, running, opposite side of his arm there. So he's got a lot of pretty incredible highlight plays. I mean, he was in the air. Both feet were in the air for that ball, and it's on the money. If you go back, he's got some full game tape that's on YouTube where you can really watch the good and some of the bad as well. And you can see, some of that throwing motion catch up to him a little bit, some inaccuracies, whether it's on the move or whether it's in the pocket. He's definitely got a freaking cannon. I mean, there's no doubt about that. He can throw it a long way. There's plays that are on this highlight tape, plays that are off the highlight tape, whether it's completions or incompletions, where he can throw it a very long way. Generally, he's pretty accurate down the field. There he is, throwing a 12-yard comeback or so, 10-yard curl, and getting out there really quick. So arm strength and even I would say arm talent is really impressive. There he is again, throwing on the move. Putting it where his receiver can catch it. So you see some of these and you go, okay, man, he's got like a super high ceiling. How do you project him? Well, obviously, coming from the Auburn perspective, you've got your Jackson Arnold, you've got your Deuce Knight, and you want to keep backfilling that position and bringing in guys that have high ceilings that fit in Hugh Freeze's offense. There's another pretty good look at the throwing motion right there. All right. Feet set. That over the top, and I don't know. It's strange and unique. And we could watch these highlights all day and you would continue to be impressed. And, I don't know, maybe we should be, more impressed and just kind of allow these plays to speak for themselves. But the idea with trying to evaluate all this stuff from the recruiting perspective is say, all right, I know who this guy is. I know, here's what I'm betting his projection is going to be. Here's how good I think he can be at the college level and beyond potentially. I've got two comps that I think are pretty interesting. I actually think they're both really good. There's another really impressive throw. I actually think they're really good comps for him. And one in particular, I think would be, really, really good in terms of I just think, it's not a super ridiculous comp or like expectations to throw on somebody. Again, people are like, oh, this could be like a Josh Allen. I think that's just not fair. Josh Allen's like top 3 quarterback in the league. It's just kind of, it's like saying like somebody's going to be like Pat Mahomes. It's just not going to happen. But I've got two comps I want to show you. We'll let him have a couple more highlights here. That's a really nice throw, kind of opposite hash to the sideline there. And, we'll see what you think. There's another one zip to the hitch. So anyway, really impressive player, but let's get to the comps. All right, this is one that I think, I don't know, people might hate. And this is Colin Kaepernick. All right, now look, I'm not even going to talk about, like removing on the football field in between the boundaries of a given play, okay? Obviously we're not talking about that, but if you just look, this is him. This is, grainy footage from high school, like 2005. It makes me feel really old, okay? But he's 6'5", 190, so very comparable to the height and weight of Payton Falzone. And if you look at the throwing motion, I mean, that's very similar. And we'll kind of go through this again. It's kind of a weird, grainy old tape. All right, here he is again. Again, obviously, Colin Kaepernick was an insane athlete, okay? I mean, all his time at Nevada, obviously in the NFL, insane athlete. There he is, 6'5", 190. Skip through some of this. I think he's got a couple more throws left again that just, I think, similar kind of hitchy, cranky throwing motions, but obviously like really impressive arm. All right. And accurate enough. And obviously a great athlete like we talked about. Like that right there, that throw that he just made, that looks to me identical to some of the stuff that I've seen Payton Falzone put on tape as well. All right, see if we got one more here. Same play. Okay, so again, that's kind of a weird one. I've got one more comp. We'll see what you think. All right, now the funny part about this is, for a while for Auburn recruiting, Travis Burgess, quarterback from Georgia, now committed to North Carolina, was a guy that was projected to Auburn. And when thinking about, comps for him, this is one of the guys that came up. This is Nick Fitzgerald. All right, quarterback at Mississippi State. Again, similar build, 6'5", lean. Watch the throwing motion again. All right. Kind of strange. All right, kind of unique, maybe you could say. Relatively effective. Nick Fitzgerald was an effective SEC quarterback. All right. A lot of his highlights are highlights on the ground. Okay, but a couple of throws, I think those throwing motions are pretty similar. All right. There's another one. Obviously got a great arm, fairly accurate. All right, and if we go back to some of these earlier highlights in the tape where he did a lot of his damage, and here's another one. There he is making a play. And look, I think Payton Falzone's a baller. I think he's a gamer. So I think, even a play like that's pretty relevant. But if we go back to some of these initial highlights, these are the first, highlights on his, highlight tape here. And this is what Payton Falzone, I think this is like the most accurate potential, the most accurate comp. If you got a Nick Fitzgerald, would you be happy? I think a Nick Fitzgerald type player in Hugh Freeze's offense could be really dangerous. Obviously, everybody wants the best of both worlds. A guy that's a great passer, very accurate, quick release, smooth motion, all that kind of stuff. But this is just who I see for Payton Falzone. And maybe he does develop into a tight end or something like that. Who knows? But at the end of the day, for Auburn, the outlook on this, optics and all that kind of stuff, obviously recruiting's not going well. I don't think it matters. Okay, at the end of the day, my little spiel, we could have 16 5-stars committed. If you go 5 and 7, okay, you're resetting the program anyway, more than likely. And so all those commits right now don't matter. Of course, you'd love to have more kids committed that you can hang on to after a good football season than having a good football season and having to flip everybody. But at the end of the day, you've got a 4-star, athlete / quarterback committed now. a guy that, let's say he develops into a Nick Fitzgerald type, you can win with that probably. Let's say he ends up developing into a tight end. Well, if he's, a 10-9 100-meter, that's the same 100-meter as Eric Perry, the running back that's committed. All right, we talked about him. So you've got a great athlete, and you're just continuing to backfill that quarterback position. I think it's a good pickup. I don't see him, being a Heisman front runner one day or anything like that, but definitely a guy that I still think can project as a functional, and dangerous starting quarterback. Look at Taylor Green at Arkansas. It's like a pretty good example, right? Dangerous starting quarterback in the league, RPO-based offense, a lot of weapons that you can distribute the ball to, and then you've got wheels. That's just a pain in the butt for a defense to contend with. So I really like the pickup in general. Let me know what you think about the comps. That's honestly like one of the things I enjoy the most about these videos is making comparisons for these guys and, and having a little bit of fun with it and seeing what you guys think. So let me know, is Colin Kaepernick a bad comp as an on-the-field comp? Is Nick Fitzgerald a bad comp or a good comp? Let me know what you think. If you have a better comp, let me know. But as always, guys, keep it locked here and keep it locked on thebarnauburn.com. And I'll see you next time.